The scent of lilacs drifted through the open window of Eleanor's small, tidy home, mingling with the faint aroma of freshly baked bread cooling on her kitchen counter. It was early morning on Mother's Day, and the world outside hummed with the gentle promise of spring. Eleanor, nearing her 78th year, moved slowly but with purpose, her hands trembling slightly as she arranged a bouquet of wildflowers she'd gathered from her garden. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, and her faded blue dress, though worn, was pressed with care. Today was special not just because it was Mother's Day, but because her son, Michael, had invited her to his home for a family celebration. It had been months since she'd seen him, his wife, Laura, or their two children, Sophie and Ben. The thought of their laughter filled her with a quiet, hopeful warmth. Eleanor's life had not been easy. Widowed at 50, she'd raised Michael alone, pouring every ounce of her love into him. She'd worked long hours as a seamstress, stitching together dreams of a better future for her only child. Michael had grown into a kind, ambitious man, now a successful architect with a family of his own. But as the years passed, distance had crept between them, not in miles, but in the small, unspoken ways that families drift apart. Laura, his wife, was polished and poised, a woman who thrived on order and perfection. Eleanor, with her simple ways and soft-spoken nature, often felt out of place in Laura's meticulously curated world. Still, Eleanor held no bitterness. She cherished every moment with her family, no matter how brief. As she packed a small tin of homemade cookies, Michael's favorite oatmeal raisin, she imagined the day ahead, Sophie's shy hugs, Ben's endless questions, and Michael's warm smile. She glanced at the clock. It was nearly time to leave. With a final look around her modest living room, where framed photos of Michael's childhood lined the walls, she gathered her purse and stepped into the soft May sunlight. The drive to Michael's house was a short one, through quiet suburban streets lined with blooming dogwoods. Eleanor's heart lifted as she pulled into their driveway, the modern, glass-fronted house gleaming under the sun. She smoothed her dress, took a deep breath, and knocked on the door. Sophie, her 10-year-old granddaughter, answered, her face lighting up. "Grandma Ellie," she squealed, throwing her arms around Eleanor's waist. Ben, 7 and full of energy, bounded over, tugging at her hand. "Did you bring cookies?" he asked, eyes wide. Eleanor laughed, her heart swelling. "Of course, sweetheart." She handed the tin to Sophie, who clutched it like a treasure. Michael appeared in the hallway, his familiar smile softening the lines of his face. "Mom," he said, pulling her into a hug. "You look great. Come on in." The house was alive with the buzz of preparation. The dining room table was set with elegant china, and the air carried the rich scent of roasted chicken and fresh herbs. Laura emerged from the kitchen, her blonde hair perfectly styled, her smile polite but restrained. "Eleanor," she said, nodding. "It's nice to see you." There was a coolness in her tone, but Eleanor brushed it aside, assuming Laura was simply busy with hosting duties. As they sat in the living room, catching up, Eleanor felt a flicker of unease. Laura seemed distracted, glancing at her phone and exchanging quick looks with Michael. The children, however, were a joy, chattering about school and their new puppy. Eleanor listened intently, her heart full, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. Lunch was announced, and the family moved to the dining room. Eleanor noticed the table was set for Michael, Laura, Sophie, and Ben. Her usual spot, at the end near Michael, was empty, the chair pushed against the wall. She hesitated, assuming it was a mistake. Laura, I think we're missing a place, she said gently, gesturing to the table. Laura's smile tightened, and she set down the platter of chicken with a deliberate thud. No, Eleanor, that's intentional, she said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the room's warmth. Michael froze, his eyes darting between his wife and mother. Sophie and Ben looked up, confused. Eleanor's heart stuttered, but she kept her composure, waiting for an explanation. Laura folded her arms, her gaze unwavering. This Mother's Day, we decided to do things differently. Your real gift, Eleanor, is not being here at all. The words landed like a slap, cold and precise. Eleanor's breath caught, and the room seemed to tilt. She looked at Michael, hoping for a defense, but he stared at the floor, his silence louder than Laura's words. Sophie's small voice broke the tension. Mom, what do you mean? Grandma's supposed to be here. Ben's lip trembled, and he clutched Eleanor's hand under the table. Eleanor forced a smile, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. It's all right, darlings. I'll head home. She stood, her legs unsteady, and moved toward the door. Michael finally spoke, his voice low. Mom, wait, but Laura cut him off. Let her go. Michael, this is what we discussed. Eleanor didn't look back. She stepped outside, the lilac-scented air now heavy with betrayal, and drove home in silence, her heart a tangle of hurt and confusion. Back in her quiet house, Eleanor sat in her armchair, the tin of cookies unopened on the table. The framed photos stared back at her, each one a memory of a time when she felt needed, loved. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she replayed Laura's words, searching for a reason, a misstep she might have made. Had she been too intrusive, too old-fashioned? The questions gnawed at her, but no answers came. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Eleanor made a decision. She wouldn't let this moment define her. She'd raised a son alone, faced grief and hardship, and come out stronger. Whatever Laura's reasons, Eleanor would find a way to mend this fracture, or at least to hold her head high. Tomorrow, she would call Michael. Tomorrow, she would try to understand. But tonight, she let herself feel the weight of the day, the sting of rejection softened only by the love she still carried for her family. The next morning, Eleanor woke to the soft chirping of birds outside her window. Her body ached from a restless night, but her resolve was firm. She brewed a pot of coffee, the familiar ritual grounding her, and sat at her kitchen table with a notepad. She needed to understand what had happened, to piece together the fragments of yesterday's pain. She wrote Michael's name at the top of the page, followed by a single question: why? She thought back to the years since Michael's marriage to Laura. Their relationship had always been polite but strained, like a thread stretched too tight. Laura was a woman of ambition, a corporate lawyer who valued efficiency and control. Eleanor, with her homemade gifts and quiet stories of the past, often felt like an outsider in Laura's world. But she'd never sensed outright hostility until yesterday. The memory of Laura's words, sharp and deliberate, made Eleanor's chest tighten. She pushed the feeling aside and dialed Michael's number. The phone rang 3 times before he answered, his voice heavy with hesitation. "Mom," he said, "I'm so sorry about yesterday. I didn't know she was going to." He trailed off, and Eleanor could hear the strain in his silence. "Michael," she said softly, "just tell me what happened. Why did Laura say that?" He sighed, and she pictured him running a hand through his dark hair, a habit he'd had since childhood. "It's complicated, Mom. Laura's been stressed. Work. the kids, everything. She's been talking about needing space, about simplifying things. I think she just snapped. Eleanor frowned, her pen hovering over the notepad. Snapped. Michael, that wasn't a snap. That was planned. She removed my chair. For heaven's sake. Her voice trembled, but she kept it steady. Did I do something to upset her? No. Mom. It's not you. He said quickly. I don't know. She's been distant lately. Even with me. I should have stopped her yesterday. But I froze. I'm sorry. Eleanor's heart softened at his apology, but the hurt lingered. I just want to understand. Michael, I love you. And I love Sophie and Ben. If Laura doesn't want me around, I need to know why. I'll talk to her. He promised. Can I come by tomorrow? Just me and the kids. Of course, Eleanor said, a flicker of hope warming her. I'd love that. After hanging up, Eleanor spent the day tending to her garden, pulling weeds and pruning roses. The physical work steadied her. Each snip of the shears a small act of control in a world that felt unsteady. She thought of her own mother, a woman who'd faced her own share of rejection and loss, but never stopped loving fiercely. Eleanor wanted to be that strong, but the sting of Laura's words made her feel small, insignificant. The next day, Michael arrived with Sophie and Ben, their faces bright with excitement. They ran to Eleanor, arms wide, and she knelt to hug them, her heart lifting. Michael lingered by the door, his expression heavy. Laura's at work, he said. I thought it'd be easier this way. They spent the afternoon baking cookies and playing board games, the children's laughter filling the house. Sophie, always observant, tugged at Eleanor's sleeve. Grandma, why didn't you stay for lunch on Mother's Day? I wanted you there. Eleanor glanced at Michael, who looked away. She smiled at Sophie, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart. But I'm here now, and that's what matters. After the kids retreated to the living room with their cookies, Michael sat with Eleanor at the kitchen table. I talked to Laura, he said, his voice low. She admitted she's been feeling overwhelmed. She thinks you remind her of what she's not. You're so good with the kids, so patient. She feels like she's failing as a mom sometimes. Eleanor's eyes widened. Failing? Laura. She's a wonderful mother. The kids adore her. Michael shrugged. She doesn't see it that way. I think she lashed out because she's struggling. But it wasn't fair. Mom. I told her that. Eleanor nodded, processing his words. She'd never considered that Laura's sharpness might come from insecurity. It didn't erase the hurt, but it gave it context. Thank you for telling me, she said. But we need to fix this. Michael. For the kids. If nothing else. He agreed, and they made a plan. Eleanor would write Laura a letter not to accuse, but to open a door. She wanted to show Laura that she wasn't a threat, that she only wanted to be part of their lives. As Michael and the kids left, Eleanor felt a spark of determination. She wasn't ready to give up on her family. That evening, she sat at her desk, a single lamp casting a warm glow over the blank page. She began to write, her words careful but heartfelt. She spoke of her love for Michael and the grandchildren, of her respect for Laura's strength, and of her hope for a better understanding between them. Each word was a step toward healing, a way to reclaim her place in a family that meant everything to her. Eleanor sealed the letter with a trembling hand, her heart pounding with both fear and hope. She'd poured her soul into those words, choosing each one with care to avoid blame while expressing her desire to mend things. The letter wasn't just for Laura, it was for herself. A declaration that she wouldn't let rejection define her worth. She slipped it into an envelope and placed it on the counter, ready to give to Michael when he next visited. The act felt like planting a seed, fragile but full of potential. Days passed, and Eleanor kept busy. She volunteered at the local library, reading stories to children and helping organize the spring book sale. The work gave her purpose, a reminder that she had value beyond her role as a mother and grandmother. But at night, alone in her quiet house, her thoughts returned to Laura's words. She wondered if the letter would make a difference or if it would be another gesture lost in the gap between them. A week later, Michael called. "Laura, read your letter," he said, his voice cautious but warm. She didn't say much, but she kept it on her desk. "I think it got to her, Mom." Eleanor's heart lifted, though she tempered her hope. Did she say anything else? Not yet, Michael admitted. But she's been quieter lately, like she's thinking things over. "I'm working on her, Mom. Just give it time." Time. Eleanor had plenty of that, but it felt heavy now, each day stretching with uncertainty. She thanked Michael and hung up, turning her attention to the garden. The roses were blooming, their petals vibrant against the green. She thought of her grandchildren, how they loved to run through the garden, chasing butterflies. She wanted them to know her, to carry her stories into their futures. That desire fueled her patience. 2 weeks after Mother's Day, Sophie called unexpectedly. "Grandma, can I come over?" she asked, her voice small but eager. Eleanor's heart leapt. "Of course, darling. Is your mom okay with it?" "Mom said it's fine," Sophie replied. "Ben's coming too." When they arrived, driven by Michael, Eleanor noticed a shift in their demeanor. Sophie was quieter, clutching a small notebook, while Ben seemed restless, glancing at his father. Michael hugged Eleanor tightly. "Laura's at home," he said. "She's trying. I'll pick the kids up in a few hours." The afternoon was a gift. Sophie showed Eleanor her notebook, filled with drawings of flowers and animals. "I want to plant a garden like yours," she said shyly. Ben, meanwhile, asked endless questions about Eleanor's old sewing machine, fascinated by its clunky mechanics. Eleanor taught them both how to plant marigold seeds, their small hands digging into the soil beside hers. For those hours, the hurt of Mother's Day faded, replaced by the simple joy of being with her grandchildren. As they worked, Sophie spoke up. "Mom's been sad," she said, her eyes on the dirt. "She cries sometimes when she thinks we're not looking." Eleanor's heart ached. "Do you know why, sweetheart?" Sophie shook her head. "She just says she's tired. But I think she misses you, Grandma." Eleanor paused, her trowel still in the soil. She hadn't considered that Laura might feel guilt or regret. The thought softened her, reminding her of her own struggles as a young mother, the weight of expectations she could never quite meet. She hugged Sophie close. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "We'll figure it out together." When Michael returned, he looked tired but hopeful. "Laura's agreed to talk," he said. "She wants to meet you for coffee next week. Just the two of you." Eleanor nodded, her stomach fluttering with nerves. "I'd like that," she said, though the thought of facing Laura alone was daunting. She spent the next few days preparing, not just for the conversation, but for the possibility that it might not go as she hoped. She wrote in her journal, reflecting on her own resilience, the years of raising Michael, the losses she'd endured. She wasn't perfect, but she was strong, and she would carry that strength into the meeting. The coffee shop was small and cozy, with wooden tables and the scent of roasted beans. Eleanor arrived early, choosing a corner table where she could see the door. When Laura walked in, her posture was stiff, her eyes guarded. But there was something else there too, a flicker of vulnerability Eleanor hadn't seen before. They ordered coffee, and for a moment, they sat in silence, the weight of Mother's Day hanging between them. Finally, Laura spoke. "Your letter. It made me think," she said, her voice low. "I owe you an apology, Eleanor. What I said was cruel, and I didn't mean it, not really." Eleanor listened, her hands clasped around her mug. She wanted to believe Laura, but she needed more than words. "Why did you say it, Laura?" she asked gently. "What made you feel I shouldn't be there?" Laura's eyes dropped to the table, and for the first time, Eleanor saw her not as the polished, unyielding woman she'd always seemed, but as someone struggling to hold it all together. The conversation was just beginning, but it was a start, a crack in the wall that had divided them. Laura took a deep breath, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "I've been drowning, Eleanor," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Work, the kids, the house, it's all too much sometimes. And you make it look so easy. The way you are with Sophie and Ben, the way they light up around you. I feel like I'm competing with you, and I'm losing." Eleanor's heart softened, but she kept her expression steady. "Laura, I'm not trying to compete. I just love them. And I admire you raising two wonderful children while managing a demanding career. I could never have done that." Laura's eyes glistened, and she looked away, blinking rapidly. "I didn't realize how much I was pushing you away," she said. "On Mother's Day, I was just angry. At myself. Mostly. But I took it out on you. And I'm sorry." The apology hung in the air, fragile but sincere. Eleanor reached across the table, her hand hesitating before resting lightly on Laura's. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "I want us to be okay, Laura. For Michael. For the kids. For us." Laura nodded, a small, tentative smile breaking through. "I want that too. I just don't know how to start." Eleanor thought for a moment. "Let's start small," she suggested. "Maybe I can come over sometimes, just to spend time with the kids. No pressure, no expectations. Just family." Laura agreed, and they spent the rest of the coffee date really talking for the first time in years. Laura shared her fears about balancing work and motherhood, and Eleanor opened up about her own struggles as a single mother, the loneliness that had often shadowed her love for Michael. By the time they parted, there was a cautious warmth between them, a bridge beginning to form. Over the next few weeks, Eleanor visited Michael's house more often, always with Laura's blessing. She kept her visits short, mindful of Laura's need for space, but each one felt like a step forward. She brought small gifts, a book for Sophie, a puzzle for Ben, and shared stories of Michael's childhood that made Laura laugh. Slowly, the tension that had defined their relationship began to ease. One afternoon, while planting bulbs in the backyard with Sophie, Eleanor noticed Laura watching from the kitchen window. There was no judgment in her gaze, only curiosity. When Laura joined them, kneeling in the dirt to help, Eleanor felt a spark of hope. They worked together in companionable silence, the children's chatter filling the air. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. As summer approached, Michael suggested a family picnic, a chance to celebrate their renewed connection. Eleanor offered to host it in her garden, where the roses were in full bloom. Laura hesitated at first, but agreed, and they spent a day planning together, choosing recipes and decorations. The collaboration felt like a gift, a sign that they were building something new. The picnic was a success. The garden was alive with color, and the air was filled with laughter. Sophie and Ben ran through the grass, chasing each other, while Michael grilled burgers and Laura set out a spread of salads and desserts. Eleanor watched it all from her porch, her heart full. For the first time since Mother's Day, she felt truly part of the family again. But healing wasn't linear. There were moments when Laura's old sharpness resurfaced, or when Eleanor felt the sting of past rejection. One evening, when Laura snapped at her over a small misunderstanding about Sophie's bedtime, Eleanor retreated to her car, her hands shaking. She drove home, questioning whether she'd been too quick to hope. But the next day, Laura called to apologize, her voice soft with regret. "I'm still learning, Eleanor," she said. "Please don't give up on me." Eleanor didn't. She kept showing up, kept loving her family, kept believing in the possibility of repair. She wrote in her journal each night, documenting the small victories, the way Laura smiled when Ben showed her a flower he'd picked with Eleanor, the way Michael hugged her a little tighter. These moments were her anchors, proof that love could endure even the deepest hurts. By late summer, Eleanor and Laura had found a rhythm. They weren't close in the way Eleanor was with Michael or the grandchildren, but they were kind to each other, respectful. Laura began to seek Eleanor's advice, asking about parenting or sharing small anecdotes from her own childhood. Eleanor listened, offering gentle wisdom without judgment. It was a delicate balance, but it worked. As the anniversary of Mother's Day approached, Eleanor felt a mix of anticipation and dread. She didn't want to relive the pain, but she also wanted to mark how far they'd come. She decided to host a small dinner, just the five of them, to celebrate not just motherhood, but family, the messy, imperfect, beautiful bond they were rebuilding. She began planning, her heart steady with purpose, determined to make this Mother's Day a memory of healing. Eleanor spent the weeks leading up to Mother's Day preparing her home and her heart. She wanted the dinner to be simple but meaningful, a reflection of the family's journey. She chose a menu of comfort foods: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and apple pie dishes that reminded her of her own mother's kitchen. She decorated the dining room with wildflowers from her garden, their vibrant colors a quiet nod to resilience. As she worked, she thought about the past year, the pain and the progress, and felt a quiet pride in how far they'd come. Laura offered to help, a gesture that surprised and touched Eleanor. They spent an afternoon together in Eleanor's kitchen, peeling apples and rolling dough, their conversation easy for the first time. Laura shared a story about her own mother, who'd passed away when she was young, and Eleanor listened, realizing how much grief still shaped Laura's life. "I think that's why I struggle sometimes," Laura admitted, her hands still in the dough. "I want to be everything for Sophie and Ben, but I'm afraid I'll never be enough." Eleanor reached for her hand. "You're more than enough, Laura. You love them fiercely, and that's what matters." Laura's eyes softened, and she nodded. "Thank you, Eleanor, for seeing that, and for everything." The dinner was set for the evening before Mother's Day, a quiet way to honor the occasion without the weight of the previous year's memory. Michael arrived early with Sophie and Ben, who ran to Eleanor with handmade cards, their drawings bright with color. "We made these for both of you," Sophie said, handing one to Eleanor and one to Laura. Eleanor's card showed a garden with two women planting flowers together, a child's vision of their budding connection. As they sat around the table, the atmosphere was warm, almost sacred. Michael raised a glass, his voice steady but emotional. "To Mom and Laura," he said, "for showing us what family means, even when it's hard." Eleanor looked at Laura, who met her gaze with a small smile. They clinked glasses, and the children giggled. breaking the moment's solemnity. The meal was filled with stories and laughter, with Ben recounting a school prank and Sophie describing her latest art project. Eleanor felt a deep gratitude not just for the moment, but for the work it had taken to get there. After dinner, as the kids played in the living room, Laura pulled Eleanor aside. "I want to do something for you tomorrow," she said. "Something to make up for last year." Eleanor shook her head. "You don't need to make up for anything, Laura. We're here now." But Laura insisted. The next morning, Mother's Day, she arrived at Eleanor's house with a small box. Inside was a locket, engraved with the initials of Sophie and Ben. "I want you to know you're part of us," Laura said, her voice thick with emotion. "Always." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the locket around her neck. "Thank you, Laura," she whispered. They hugged. A real embrace. Not just polite, but heartfelt. Michael and the kids joined them, and they spent the day together, walking through Eleanor's garden, sharing stories, and planting new seeds, literal and figurative. As the sun set, Eleanor stood on her porch, watching her family drive away. The locket rested against her heart, a tangible reminder of their journey. She thought of her own mother, of the strength she'd drawn from her, and felt a quiet certainty that she was passing that strength to her family, even through the cracks of their imperfections. The year had been a crucible, burning away old hurts and forging something stronger. Eleanor knew there would be more challenges, more moments of doubt, but she also knew they'd face them together. She stepped inside, the scent of lilacs following her, and sat at her kitchen table. She opened her journal and began to write, not of pain, but of love, off a family that had stumbled but refused to fall. In the months that followed, Eleanor's relationship with her family grew stronger, rooted in the small, intentional moments they shared. She and Laura continued to meet for coffee, their conversations deepening into a genuine friendship. Laura began to open up about her fears and dreams, and Eleanor shared stories of her own life, weaving a tapestry of understanding between them. Sophie and Ben became frequent visitors, their laughter a constant in Eleanor's home. Michael, too, seemed lighter, as if the weight of last Mother's Day had finally lifted. Eleanor found herself reflecting on the power of forgiveness, not just forgiving Laura, but forgiving herself for the moments she'd felt inadequate or unworthy. She realized that love, in its truest form, wasn't about perfection, but about showing up, again and again, even when it hurt. She wrote these thoughts in her journal, her words a testament to the resilience she'd cultivated over a lifetime. One crisp autumn day, Laura invited Eleanor to a school event where Sophie was performing in a play. As they sat together in the auditorium, watching Sophie shine on stage, Eleanor felt a profound sense of belonging. Laura reached for her hand, squeezing it gently, and Eleanor knew they'd crossed a threshold. They weren't just family by circumstance, they were family by choice. The holidays brought more opportunities to strengthen their bond. Eleanor hosted Thanksgiving, and Laura insisted on bringing her famous pecan pie. The table was crowded with food and love, with Michael carving the turkey and Ben sneaking extra rolls. As they ate, Eleanor looked around, her heart full. This was what she'd fought for, not just a seat at the table, but a place in their lives. When Mother's Day came around again, Eleanor felt no dread, only anticipation. The family planned a simple brunch at Michael's house, and this time, Eleanor's chair was firmly in place, adorned with a small bouquet of wildflowers, a nod to her garden. Laura gave a toast, her voice steady and warm. "To Eleanor," she said, "for teaching us what it means to love without conditions." Eleanor's eyes misted, but she smiled, raising her glass. "To all of us," she said, "for choosing each other, As the years passed, Eleanor's role in the family became a cornerstone, not just for Michael and the grandchildren, but for Laura too. They faced life's challenges together: Sophie's teenage years, Ben's adventures in college, Michael's career changes. Through it all, Eleanor remained a quiet pillar, her love a constant in a changing world. In her final years, Eleanor's health began to fade, but her spirit never did. She spent her days in her garden, teaching Sophie's children how to plant seeds, just as she had with their mother. Laura, now softened by time and love, sat with her often, sharing stories and silence in equal measure. When Eleanor passed, surrounded by her family, she left behind a legacy of resilience and grace. At her memorial, Laura spoke, her voice breaking but strong. Eleanor taught me that family isn't about being perfect, it's about showing up, even when it's hard. She gave us her heart, and we're better for it. The family planted a rose bush in Eleanor's garden, a tribute to her love that would bloom for years to come. And as they stood together, the scent of lilacs in the air, they knew that her spirit lived on in them, not just in the memories, but in the way they chose to love, fiercely and without condition, every single day.